Coming back to Netflix, how was the process of pitching your show to Netflix and getting in touch with producers and screenwriters and directors? How was the process from the BBC, from journalism to Netflix?
Well, what I did at the BBC is very similar to what I was about to do for Netflix. So I made a number of prominent documentaries for the BBC about prisons in the United Kingdom. I was given exclusive access to prisons in the United Kingdom by the British prison system. So I wasn't new to this space, since my release. I had the expertise. People trusted me. I had the credibility to do an honest job, an honest and truthful job that was not sensationalist. And I'd been at the BBC for 16 years, where I'd been a reporter, and I'd become an undercover journalist, and I became an investigative journalist, working on, as I say, some of the most prominent stations. And after 16 years, I needed new challenges. I needed new experiences. So as I was making the decision to change my career, Netflix, which was becoming this new streaming platform that was growing and becoming big and well known, were looking for a presenter, a host for this show to do with prisons. And it was a show that had already been on the UK television broadcasting platform. So Netflix came in and bought that show. They wanted that show, but they wanted a new presenter. I was that new presenter. So the negotiation was pretty straightforward, actually, in that Netflix wanted this Inside the World's Toughest Prisons on their platform. They wanted a new presenter to present it, and I was their first choice. I was the person that they wanted. And so they approached. We had a conversation, the production company and myself. And I only had very simple requests. I should have said to them, £10 million an episode, but that was never going to happen. So I had a very simple request, which is, you've got to allow me to do it the way I want to do it. You've got to allow me to present it within reason, and let me make it as authentic as I possibly can. Of course, as the show goes, there is a formula. I arrive, I go through the process of being integrated into the prison. I meet prisoners. So there is a formula to each episode, as anyone who watches it will know. Every episode has certain points that are similar, the same process, whether it's me being stripped at the beginning and search, or whether it's me being released at the end and summarizing what it is I think about the prison. So it was really a kind of meeting of minds, really, between myself, the production company, and Netflix. And we agreed. We did the first episode, Brazil being the very first one that I filmed in. Brazil, Belize, Ukraine, and I think it was Colombia. It might not have been Colombia in my first episode, but South American prisons were the most challenging, I must admit. Paraguay, Colombia, Brazil, they were the most challenging, not only because of the weather and the heat, which I love, but it's still really difficult to operate. But there's also a language barrier. I don't speak Spanish. I don't speak Portuguese. So I have to have a translator, which is obviously the sound recorder. But the transition from the BBC to Netflix was smooth, is what I would say. What I wasn't prepared for was two things. One was the success of the show. This is a show about life in prisons around the globe. And it became hugely successful for Netflix, but hugely popular for me, where I was becoming more known around the globe. My story, my backstory, like what I'm sharing with you today, became more known to people around the world. And they took an interest in that. They also took an interest in the show. But what really blew me away was how ignorant people around the globe are of their prison system. So, I get messages from thousands of Brazilians who say to me and have said to me over the years that they were unaware that that's what prisons were like in Brazil. That having watched that episode, they didn't know that that's what life was like in Brazilian prisons, and that they appreciate me showing them that side of life, not just here in Brazil, but in other prisons around the globe, so that they can compare and contrast the differences with how governments treat their fellow citizens, and more importantly, the most deprived, challenged, vulnerable people in society are often the ones that end up in prison out of desperation or mental health. So it's been really, really inspiring to me to know that this global audience who watch the Netflix show are interested in what they are seeing and care about the people that they hear from, even though they are criminal.
And Mr. Rowe, and expanding to your podcast, Second Chance, what was your what was the difference from the podcast to Netflix, and how was the process from Netflix to the podcast? How did you expand? How did the idea of the podcast come about?
So, like most people who started a podcast when podcasts became popular, it was during the COVID lockdown period. You know, you couldn't get out there and do your stuff.
That's how they became popular.
Exactly. Well, I found the opportunity to record interview with people over Zoom or whatever, like you and I are doing right now, an easy thing to do. And Second Chance came about because I was having a conversation with a producer, and we were talking about, you know, what we could do, how we could do a podcast, what it was be about. And we just started talking about second chances, people's second chances in life. And it turned to me and my second chance. And I'm sort of saying, I wasn't given a second chance. I took my second chance. I fought hard and long for my freedom. No one gave me a second chance. I took back my life. I fought for my freedom. And so I wanted to expand it to, you know, what does a second chance mean to people? Do you give people a second chance? Do they earn a second chance? And it can mean anything, right? It can be a relationship where your partner cheats on you. Do you give them a second chance if you really love them? Is it too painful? When somebody's been released from prison, do you welcome them back into your family and give them a second chance? If you know, somebody loses the ability to walk during a car crash, what is their second chance? You know, do they become a Paralympic? You know, so everybody should look at second chances from a different perspective, depending on who the person is. Can a victim of a crime, let's say a rape victim, somebody who's raped, can they give the person who raped them a second chance? Is that a religious decision, a faith decision? Do they think that person deserves a second chance? And who decides who gets a second chance? So I was grappling with these questions. So I thought, ideal, let's call it a second chance, the podcast. So that's what I called it, Second Chance. And I tried to talk to people about their second chances, about the second chances they've given people, the second chance they want. So that was the journey of the podcast, really. And that's how I've tried to shape it. And it's a simple, like this, one-to-one interview with that person where we delve into their lives. And it's interesting because I'm in conversation with the BBC. So I'm a freelance journalist now. I'm not staff for anybody. And I'm talking to the BBC about relaunching the podcast in a different way. So watch this space.